It was a week today since the tragic plane crash involving the Chief of Army Staff, the Lieutenant General Ibrahim Attairu. And today, a new man is assumed office. It is 24 hours after he was appointed by the President. The new Chief of Army Staff, Major General Farouk Yahya, has begun work. The ceremony took place at the Nigerian Army headquarters in Abuja. On arrival, the Chief of Army Staff performs his first official duty, which is the inspection of the Quarter Guard. Major General Farouk Yahya is the 22nd Chief of Army Staff. I thought we'll be able to see where the Chief of Army Staff was performing that, so that you can get to see the face of the man we're talking about, because the conversation tonight is all about him and what lies ahead of him today. So you see him there in those in that video on your screen. Well, amidst all of these are the critical issues of insecurity, with the Nigerian Army playing key roles, and the troops have their presence in at least 34 states of the 36 states of the Federation. Tonight, we'll take a look at the job of the Chief of Army Staff, the task before the new man at the helm of affairs, and how Nigeria is going to overcome this insecurity situation that has bedeviled the country. I have joining me a retired military officer, Colonel Yamidare, here in our Lagos studio. And in our Abuja studio is a security consultant, Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight. It's always exciting to have both of you on the program because of the kind of expertise you bring into the conversation. I know that the new Chief of Army Staff was way your junior in the Army, but you can be able to give us an understanding of what lies ahead of him. And of course, I know Mr. Adamu has some technical expertise in the fight against insurgency in the northeast region of the country. First and foremost, Mr. Dari, Colonel Dari, give us an understanding of this new man at the helm of affairs.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's always a delight to be on board here with you. And then, good evening, Nigerians. Sure, it's so unfortunate that we lost General Attairu, a soldier to the core, full of energy and resolute to fight this insurgency. But unfortunately, his life had to be cut short with the tragedy. May his soul rest in peace.
Amen.
Having said that, of course, I mean, that's life. Life is a continuum. I welcome the appointment of General Yahya as the Chief of Army Staff. No doubt, before one can be appointed Chief of Army Staff, he must have maintained or kept a very good record, a remarkable record. And I think I've had one or two interactions with the gentleman officer. I have no doubt that he's going to deliver, and even going by the applause that welcomed his appointment, I'm sure that he's going to take this battle further, and hopefully we should get some victory. However, I still have some things that I would like to talk about it by way of advice for the new Chief of Army Staff.
Okay, so before we go into that, let's do some let's clear something. And because you served in the Army, so you will know, he's a 2-star general.
Absolutely.
And for that office, you need a 3-star general, isn't it?
Of course.
For the office of the Chief of Army Staff.
Of course, yes.
You need at least to be a 3-star general. So we're expecting that it might be promoted in the coming days.
Well, that's the tradition.
Okay. So everyone that is the 3-star general, those who are a senior or above, will have to be automatically retired if they are in the Nigerian Army. Is that a tradition too?
Well, that's what you call natural attrition.
In the Army?
Absolutely. Not only in the Army, I believe it works everywhere. But especially in the Army, because the Army is a unique, organization whereby, you have to give orders and you have to take orders. And by way of our training and discipline, it's inappropriate for a senior to take orders from his junior. So the honorable thing to do in the circumstance, not to even wait until their retirement are pronounced. It's just better to put in your paper and then you leave.
It's painful sometimes, isn't it? Because some of the hopes of some of the ones who are a senior are going to just be dashed. I mean, their career has just come summarily to an end. From what I'm hearing, at least 10 three-star generals will go.
Well, I'm not sure of the numbers because I'm not in there. But the truth again is that I don't think it should be painful like you said. Because once you join the military, there are certain things that are inevitable. There are certain things that just have to happen. So you must be prepared, like a Boy Scout.
Okay.
Be prepared.
Let me ask Mr. Farouk Adam, please get into the conversation, please, and give us a sense of what you think. At some point, China Television had this conversation with you when the late Chief of Army Staff was appointed and when he died. But what do you know about Major General Farouk Yahya? What can you tell us about him?
Thank you, Sheun, and good evening to everyone. Like my co-discussant had mentioned, he's a stellar officer who has stood out over time as a professional, and incidentally has also been in what I would call the corridors of powers, having been an aide to a former Minister of Defense, having served in the Secretariat of the Army, having also served as the commanding officer at least 2 divisions, and then most recently in the Operation Hadinkai in the Northeast. So definitely he's got that operational experience, and then the leadership experience for administration, and then other qualities. The second thing that has also come to light is his ability to carry his team along. Since his appointment, I have monitored the kind of reaction by different segments of the army, as it were, and virtually all the segments are happy with the appointment. I'm yet to hear any of the segments that has sounded anything negative regarding the gentleman in question. So it appears that we have someone who enjoys the love and support of the army, and who over time has proved himself to be a professional.
We're due for break in just about 40 or 50 seconds. But what do you feel is happening? The experience in Maiduguri or in Borno State or in the Northeast seems to be a very major criteria in the appointment for the Chief of Army Staff for President Buhari, and why?
Well, when President Buhari took over, when he was elected in his first tenure, and even into his second tenure, the most vibrant threat that the country faced was terrorism. And then if we also put into consideration the fact that his 3-pronged promise to Nigeria was to address the insecurity challenge, diversify the economy, and then address corruption. So clearly, that promise, that desire to especially tame the monster of terrorism is influencing this disappointment. And so clearly, persons who have had experience with battling terrorism appears to come to the forefront when it comes to appointment of service chiefs in the country.
Let me quickly ask Mr. Kabiru this question before I'd like to get your take on this too. Whether or not there is something that happens in the military that we don't know that informs some of this appointment. But Mr. Kabiru Adamu, I know that you must have heard people make this argument relating to geographical, ethnic, or regional consideration in this appointment. Have you heard this kind of argument and people questioning why this appointment has to come, especially within the security circle, why it has to come from a particular segment of the country?
Yes, Sheun. So I run a consultancy, and part of what we do is what we call atmospherics, where we put our ears and eyes and harvest intelligence and even whispers like that. So yes, there have been whispers, especially from the southeast of the country, expressing the desire and hope that perhaps someone from that region should have been appointed. And I also observed something that I found shocking, what I would call a campaign, really, by certain persons, possibly even within the military, on newspapers championing the names and causes of individuals that should be appointed. That's after the death of General Atahiru, before the appointment of General Farouk. So yes, that's definitely out there. And of course, we analyzed it. It does have a consequence in terms of the current perception of marginalization, as well as perhaps the reality of marginalization and the allegation and accusation of nepotism against Mr. President. Now, it's very important to note that the appointment of a chief of staff is strictly the prerogative of the president. And so there is no constitutional criteria, as it were, for the appointment either from a particular region or even in terms of rank. Yes, there are traditions, and retired Colonel Dari has mentioned some of these traditions, but from a constitutional point of view, it's the prerogative of Mr. President to make the appointment.
Let me get your view. What's your view on that, Colonel Dari?
Well, I must say to you that I totally align with my colleague Garba on this point, because it is the prerogative of Mr. President, to appoint who is service chiefs or will be, because once you are qualified, every two-star general is qualified, as it were, to be appointed Chief of Army Staff, though there are some other criteria too. And I'm sure that Mr. President, a retired general himself, a retired GOC, he haven't been a GOC, a commander of men, and he also is quite, abreast with what expectations of a chief of army staff should be.
What about the perception?
Well, perception
of the ethnic and preference, the perception of a preference for a certain region of the country in some of these security appointments.
Well,
does it matter?
Well, my take on this is, Nigeria. Nigeria is highly cosmopolitan, and even if you appoint the next chief of army staff from whatever geographical spread, people will still have one thing or the other to talk about.
But could there be a balance?
For me,
is that easy in the military? Is it easy to get a balance either for the chief of defense staff, the chief of naval staff, chief of air staff, and have a balance that will spread across?
Well,
is it a difficult task to do?
Well, from what we know, from what existed whilst I was in service, in the hierarchy of the military, where you have the chief of army staff, you probably look at the chief of policy and plans as probably the next in command, as it were, But having said that, well, there's no hard and fast rule. There's no constitutional provision for that. Okay? So the president still has the prerogative, and he can exercise that. Okay.
From your point of view, and I also like Mr. Kabir Adamu to give insight into this. How daunting will this challenge be for the new chief of army staff? Can he use experienced military generals that are out? What are those things that he needs to know right now that you think are important to achieve the job that he has on his hand now?
Well, that's a very good one, and that's where I'd like to really come out and talk. You can't wish away experience. And I believe that even the Chief of Army Staff before Atairu also was doing that. And I think late Atairu, General Atairu, too, considered that. And I would like to say that the present Chief of Army Staff should also put that on the front burner, whereby retired senior military officers, even across the rank, you have soldiers who left the service and are quite, still versatile and useful, and they can contribute, to this war against insurgents, or even building, the 21st century army. And now, one very, very important thing that I expect the current Chief of Army Staff to consider is, first, having been in the middle of operation himself, he has been in the theater of operations, he has to look at what is his vision, okay? And then what about the mode of operation of the past Chief of Army Staffs, especially the immediate past Chief of Army Staff? And then let him now lay out his own plans.
Can he use the one that has been laid? Because I understand that the late Lieutenant General Atairu had a clear roadmap. And some people say it started working.
Well, if you say he has a clear roadmap, notwithstanding, everybody with his own individual perception that you have to bring on board. But what I'm saying here is that we have to look at the French model of the Maginot Line. Okay? The Maginot Line, that was what the French depended upon. You remember during the Second World War, okay? They had all this fortification along their borders, okay? And then they were going to use that against the Allied forces, especially the German forces, when they were advancing on Paris. And of course, Paris, fell on the 14th of June, 1930. Regardless of what they had fortified there. Yeah. Okay? So what we're saying here is that the French, they depended on, the Maginot Line, and they thought it was impenetrable.
But at the end of the day...
At the end of the day, it fell. It didn't work. So what I'm saying here is that you find out that this is a war that we've been fighting for over 10 years. Okay?
We need to rethink our strategy.
It's high time we rejig and take the war to the door of the enemy, rather than sit down, defending a position. And that is the problem that we've been having. So I think the present Chief of Army Staff should consider a more versatile and mobile army than what
a more technical, more brutal, more digital.
Absolutely.
Let me get. This is going to be the closing response from Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Does the new Chief of Army Staff have all it requires to achieve the job at hand?
Unfortunately, no. And I listed a few things as challenges. Since I don't have time, let me just quickly mention them. So he has a problem currently with leadership oversight, especially between the military and the civilian, administration that we have. Time will not allow me to go into that. The second point is funding constraints. Then corruption and lack of accountability, a huge issue within the military. Equipment and logistic deficits. Then personnel and training gaps, as well as poor civil-military relations. And then lastly, poor welfare conditions. Now, these are all things that he's going to inherit, and he will have to address them. The other one that would really rear its ugly head is how he manages this discussion that we're having. The generals that would have to go, the ones that went when General Atahiru was appointed, and then the ones whose promotions were stunted when General Burutai was the Chief of Army Staff. Those are things he would have to deal with, unfortunately. And I do have a suggestion. Those people, instead of retiring them, perhaps can be moved to other positions, even within the Ministry of Defense or some of the institutions under the ministry, so that instead of wasting all these assets generals that have been trained over a long period. They can serve in other functions and at least contribute to national growth and the issue of insecurity. So yes, he has that challenge ahead of him, but he's also got these other options.
We're just at the very threshold of our time here on the program, but I must sincerely thank you for your expertise and the knowledge that you've shared, both of you, Mr. Kabiru Adamu and Colin Yomidare. It's always a pleasure having both of you on this kind of issues.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I barely have time to say my name after this show. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Bye-bye.